All right, so today we're gonna really dive deep into this whole Azure thing.
Azure, yeah.
Microsoft's cloud platform, right? Everyone's talking about it.
It's everywhere you look.
It is, and we've got these excerpts from a Korean document,
Okay.
and it's basically like Azure 101, like a getting started guide.
Yeah, like an intro.
Exactly. And you might be thinking, cloud computing, Korean document sounds a bit much.
A little niche.
It does, but trust me, it's way more interesting than it sounds.
Absolutely.
We're going to break it down, uncover the surprising ways Azure's already kind of woven into your life
It's sneaky like that.
without you even realizing it.
It really is. And what I find fascinating is how this document, even though it's in Korean, right, it kind of speaks to this global shift that's happening towards cloud computing.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
We're talking about like a fundamental change in how businesses operate, how we use technology.
Yeah, it's huge.
And Azure is right there at the center of it all.
Right from the get-go, they make this distinction between, like, personal clouds, you know? Like your Google Drive, Dropbox, that kind of thing.
Your everyday cloud.
Exactly. And what they call enterprise clouds, the big leagues.
Big players.
Like Azure.
Right.
And it all comes down to control, right? With those personal clouds, it's all about you managing your own little world of files.
You're the captain of your own ship.
Exactly. But with Azure, it's more like your organization, your company, they hold the keys to the kingdom.
Yeah, it's like, imagine instead of you and I subscribing to the New York Times individually, right?
Right.
Our whole company has this one giant subscription that everyone shares.
Oh.
That's basically what they call a tenant in Azure.
Okay, so tenant.
Like your organization's dedicated space in the cloud.
So you got your tenant, your little piece of the Azure pie. What do you actually do with it?
Right.
This document lists like 1 million services.
It's a lot. And it's true, it can be a bit overwhelming.
Yeah, like where do you even begin?
Where do you even start?
Yeah.
You've got virtual machines, which is basically like renting computers in the cloud.
Okay.
You've got app services, so you can launch websites, apps super easily.
Wow.
There's even stuff for machine learning and AI.
It's crazy.
This isn't just storing files, you know. It's a whole digital playground for businesses.
And they actually compare Azure to its biggest competitors.
Oh, yeah, the showdown.
Right. You've got your Amazon Web Services, AWS,
A big dog.
and Google Cloud.
Right, they're all in the mix.
But what really blew my mind, and they specifically mentioned this, Azure actually powers things like ChatGPT
Oh, wow.
through its partnership with OpenAI.
That's a really good point, and I think it highlights how central Azure has become, not just for businesses and like everyday operations, but for these big technological advancements that we're seeing.
That's huge.
Even if you're not out there building the next ChatGPT, just understanding Azure gives you this glimpse into the engine behind some of the most exciting technology today.
Yeah, like it's like finding out that your car runs on the same technology as a spaceship or something.
Exactly.
Okay, so Azure, it's powerful, it's versatile, but what about the cost? Is this only for like Fortune 500 companies?
That's what's interesting. One of Azure's biggest selling points is its cost effectiveness.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes back to that whole tenant thing we were talking about.
Okay.
So instead of companies having to buy tons of expensive servers, equipment, all that stuff up front,
Right.
they only pay for what they use with Azure.
Oh, interesting.
It's like switching from, you know, an old landline phone plan
Yeah.
to a cell phone plan where you're only charged for the minutes you use.
That makes a lot of sense.
It's a game changer for a lot of businesses.
Okay, so we're talking about cloud computing, we're talking about data storage. I can't help but think about security.
Of course. Yeah.
Is that a major concern with a platform like Azure?
You're right to be thinking about that. Security is critical.
Right.
But the document actually goes into detail about Azure's security features, and they're pretty impressive.
Okay, like what? Give me some examples.
Well, they highlight things like multi-factor authentication.
Right.
You know, where you need a code from your phone on top of your password.
Yeah, that extra layer of security.
Exactly. It's like having a security guard check your ID twice before they let you into a building.
Double the security, double the peace of mind.
That's the idea.
Okay, but honestly, I gotta say, all this technical talk, it can be a bit overwhelming.
I hear you.
It's like they're speaking a different language sometimes.
There's definitely a learning curve. It's like learning a new language.
Exactly.
But this document actually does a pretty good job of holding your hand through a lot of it.
Okay.
They actually show you how to navigate the Azure portal, which is basically your dashboard for managing everything.
Okay.
And then there's the Cloud Shell.
Okay, the Cloud Shell. See, that already sounds a little intimidating.
I know, right? It sounds like a weapon from a sci-fi movie or something.
Well, like something out of Star Trek.
Exactly. But it's actually pretty cool. It's like a direct line of communication to Azure.
Okay.
You manage things through text commands. It's like having this secret language to talk to the cloud.
Okay. Now that's kind of cool.
It's pretty powerful stuff.
That's what I call a useful secret. But before we get too lost in the weeds here, there's one more concept they throw at us that I need some clarification on. Entra ID.
Okay, yeah. Entra ID.
What is that?
So Entra ID is basically like the gatekeeper to your Azure kingdom, right?
Okay.
Remember how we talked about tenants being your organization's dedicated space?
Yeah.
Entra ID manages who has access to that space and what they're allowed to do once they're in.
So it's like a really strict bouncer at a club. Okay, got it. You decide who gets in and what they can do once they're past the velvet rope.
You got it. And it's not just about keeping the wrong people out. It's about making sure the right people have the right level of access to do their jobs.
Makes sense.
Especially in big companies where you've got sensitive data, complex workflows, you need someone keeping things organized.
You don't want any interns accidentally causing a system-wide crash.
Exactly. You don't want any accidental chaos. And what's wild is Entra ID. It's not just an Azure thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah. This document actually mentions how Microsoft 365 uses it too.
You mean like Word and Excel online?
Yep, all that. It's got Entra ID working behind the scenes.
So even if I'm just like, sending emails,
Nah.
Entra ID is still there doing its thing.
It's like the silent partner in your productivity.
That's kind of wild when you think about it.
It is, and it just goes to show how interconnected everything is becoming. But here's where it gets even more interesting, especially for organizations.
Okay.
The document goes into how you can delegate access and control within Entra ID.
So it's not like all or nothing.
Exactly. You can get really specific about who has permission to do what.
So instead of just being a bouncer at the club, it's more like
giving different keys to different rooms in a building.
Right. You don't want the new intern accidentally rebooting the main server or something.
Exactly. You want to make sure the right people have the right access.
And I'm guessing that's where those Azure policies come in that the document mentions.
You got it. Think of it like Azure policies let you set boundaries, like guardrails in your cloud playground.
Okay, I like that analogy.
You want to make sure all your company data is stored in a specific region. Azure policy can handle that.
So it's all about maintaining control, even in this really flexible environment.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And it goes even further. The document even mentions Azure locks.
Azure locks.
Yeah, it's like, imagine you could put a digital padlock on your most important resources.
So no one can accidentally delete them or change them.
Exactly. It's like a safety net for those critical assets.
That's actually pretty clever. It's like in those action movies where they lock down the computer system so the bad guys can't get in.
Right. Except in this case, you're protecting your business from any mishaps.
Exactly. I like it. And this document, it actually walks you through setting all of this up.
It does. It's surprisingly user-friendly.
So you could theoretically become an Azure security guru just by reading this document.
Well, maybe not a guru overnight, but it's definitely a good starting point.
There you go.
Yeah.
I'm starting to feel like there are so many layers to this Azure thing.
It's true. It's a pretty vast platform.
It can be a lot to wrap your head around.
Yeah, but that's why understanding the core concepts is key, right? It's like we were saying earlier, it's like this giant digital playground.
Right, with all these different tools and services.
Exactly. You got to know what each piece of equipment does before you can really start building something amazing.
Otherwise, it's just going to be chaos.
Exactly. And no one wants that.
Okay, so for a listener out there who might be thinking, this all sounds fascinating, but I'm not a tech expert.
Right.
Why should they care about Azure? What's the relevance to their everyday life?
That's the million-dollar question. And this is where the document gets really cool, because it connects the dots between this technical stuff and the actual impact it has on our lives.
Okay, I'm listening.
For example, remember how we talked about Azure powering ChatGPT?
Yeah, through OpenAI.
Right, we're talking AI-powered chatbots, virtual assistants, even those personalized recommendations you get on your favorite streaming service.
Okay, yeah.
All of that relies on cloud computing platforms like Azure.
So even if I'm not building the next big tech thing, Azure is still shaping my digital experience.
Exactly. It's like the invisible engine behind so much of what we do online.
Wow, I never thought about it like that.
And for businesses, it's not just about the flashy stuff. It's about efficiency, scalability, flexibility.
Right, like having a digital office space that can grow or shrink as needed.
Exactly. And with Azure's pay-as-you-go model, businesses can avoid those massive upfront costs of traditional IT infrastructure.
Right, which is a game changer, especially for smaller businesses or startups.
Exactly. It levels the playing field in a lot of ways.
Okay, so we've got the cost effectiveness, the flexibility, but let's be real, no technology is perfect.
That's true.
What's the catch with Azure? Are there any downsides?
That's a really good question. And honestly, the document doesn't really dwell too much on potential downsides.
Of course not. They're trying to sell you on Azure.
Right. But that's where it's important to think critically.
Right, exactly. No such thing as a free lunch.
Exactly. So one thing to consider is vendor lock-in.
Vendor lock-in.
Yeah, once you've built your entire infrastructure on Azure,
Okay.
switching to a competitor like AWS or Google Cloud, it could be a massive pain.
It's like moving all your furniture into a new apartment and then realizing the door frames are too small.
Exactly. It's a logistical nightmare.
Okay, so vendor lock-in is something to keep in mind.
Definitely. And then there's the issue of data privacy and security.
Right, which is always a concern.
Absolutely. And while Azure has those robust security features we talked about,
Yeah.
entrusting your data to a third-party provider always has some level of inherent risk.
It's like giving someone a key to your house.
Exactly. You hope they're responsible, but you never know.
Right, there's always that element of trust.
And while Azure offers tools and features to mitigate those risks, it's crucial for organizations to really think it through, do their homework.
Understand their own security needs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's not just a plug-and-play situation.
It's about making informed decisions about your data and your infrastructure.
Absolutely. And that's where having even a basic understanding of Azure can be so empowering.
It's like they say, with great power comes great responsibility, right?
Exactly. And this document, even though it's, a technical guide, it kind of hints at that responsibility.
Okay.
Like it wants you to think beyond just, how do I use this tool? And start asking, what are the bigger implications of using this tool?
So it's not just about knowing how to use the hammer, it's about knowing what you're building and why.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where things get really interesting because Azure and cloud computing in general, we're still in the early stages.
It's true, it's still evolving.
They're scratching the surface of what's possible.
It's like we've discovered this new continent and now we're exploring all these uncharted territories.
I like that analogy. It's a really good way to put it.
What I find so exciting is that this exploration isn't just happening in Silicon Valley, it's happening globally.
Yeah, it's a worldwide phenomenon.
And this Korean document, it's a perfect example of that.
It really is.
Here we are, right? Unhacking Azure insights from a document written on the other side of the world.
And it just goes to show how interconnected this technology is.
Right. Like, it doesn't matter where you are, we're all kind of grappling with these same questions, these same possibilities.
Exactly. And I think it highlights the importance of diverse perspectives in all of this.
Yeah, for sure.
It's not just about engineers and developers anymore. It's about everyone having a voice.
So for our listener out there who might be thinking, okay, this Azure thing sounds cool, but it's also a lot to take in.
It can be a bit overwhelming, yeah.
What's the one key takeaway you want them to walk away with?
I'd say just remember that Azure isn't this abstract technical concept that's irrelevant to their life.
Right.
It's actually the driving force behind so much of what we do online. From streaming our favorite shows to connecting with friends on social media.
It's everywhere.
It is. And for businesses, it's really becoming the backbone of our digital economy.
So whether you're a tech enthusiast or you're just starting to learn about cloud computing.
There's something in Azure for everyone.
Exactly. It's something worth paying attention to.
And who knows, maybe our listener will be inspired to, learn more, explore further.
Dive in.
Exactly. And maybe even contribute to shaping the future of Azure.
Now, wouldn't that be something? Well, on that note, I think we'll leave our listener with one final thought to ponder. We've uncovered the power, the potential, the challenges of Azure, but the real question is, how will GRIU be a part of this cloud-powered future?